Okay, there's one other passage not about Miriam that I want us to examine in this tape and then probably pick up in class as well. If Miriam is an example of a leader in Israel, and I think clearly she is, although one might argue that she becomes victimized particularly by Yahweh, who supports her brother in the leadership struggle and then strikes her with leprosy. But it's a lot more obvious in this, and I want to use this passage on the tape to recommend the legal material in the Pentateuch, the things that aren't particularly related to a narrative or story, but are prescriptions about how the Israelite society is supposed to be run. So turn to Numbers chapter 5, and that's page 171. And within Bach, and also within just discussions of this passage in scholarly circles, this passage is called the Sotah. Sotah is simply a Hebrew word that, as you'll see, is used frequently in the passage, and it means to go astray. Now, when a woman is caught in adultery by two witnesses, and that's what we had, you'll notice in the book of Susanna, which you read a few classes ago. When a woman is caught in adultery by two or more witnesses, there is no problem. She's immediately subject to execution, death by stoning. And that's, of course, what we see in the woman caught in adultery in the Gospel of John, where they drag this woman to Jesus and they say, "We caught this woman in the act of adultery, in the very act." And, of course, one wonders, well, where's the guy? There's no guy there. They're just bringing the woman out. And they say, "What does the law of Moses say to do?" And, of course, there was no ambiguity about the law of Moses. The law of Moses said, two witnesses, you stone her to death. But what happens if there aren't two witnesses? What happens if there are no witnesses? What happens if the husband is just a little suspicious? He's wondering whether or not his wife has been faithful to him. Or more strongly, he thinks, no evidence at all, but he thinks that his wife is being unfaithful to him. Well, the law of the Sotah is the provision for that. And it's one of the most horrifying parts of the Bible. It begins in Numbers chapter 5, verse 11. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, and that's a standard legal introduction formula, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if any man's wife goes astray," and that's the word Sotah, "and is unfaithful to him, if a man has intercourse with her, but it is hidden from her husband, so that he is undetected, so that she is undetected, though she defiled herself." Notice they're assuming the guilt of the woman in the way the law is structured and stated. So if a woman has been unfaithful but has remained undetected, she's defiled herself, but there's no witness against her, and there is no witness against her since she was not caught in the act, if a spirit of jealousy comes upon him, that is the husband. So all we're really talking about here, let's be honest, all we're really talking about here is that the husband has a spirit of jealousy. The husband is feeling jealous. No evidence. He just kind of thinks that she's doing something on the outside. This is what he can do. If a spirit of jealousy comes on him and he is jealous of his wife who has defiled herself, but we don't know that yet. Or if a spirit of jealousy comes on him and he is jealous of his wife though she has not defiled herself, then the man shall bring his wife to the priest. He shall bring the offering required for her, and then it gives the offering, and this is how the priest made a living, by the way. He shall pour no oil on it, special if it's a grain offering of jealousy, and this is what the priest does. Then the priest shall bring her near and set her before Yahweh. And that term, I want you to pay careful attention to that term, before Yahweh. It always means this is a cultic act. This is an act that the community does before Yahweh, religiously, in Yahweh's presence. Yahweh is expected to do something in response to something that you do before Yahweh. Lifnai Adonai is the way it comes out in Hebrew. So I'll remind you of that. So the priest shall bring her near and set her lifnai Adonai before Yahweh. The priest shall take holy water in an earthen vessel and take some of the dust that is on the floor of the tabernacle. Now, I don't know if this is significant, but think of what the dust on the floor of the tabernacle has seen. This is a place where they ritually slaughter animals. This is the dust upon which has been poured day after day after day the blood of sacrificial animals, which has sunk into the ground, and the flies and the smell and the offal. This has to be the filthiest, most bacteria-laden dust on the face of the planet. This is not dust that you want to consume in any way, shape, or form. So just keep that in mind. So he takes this holy water and he mixes it with dust that is on the floor of the tabernacle and puts it in the water. Okay, so that's the first thing. Let's just get a list down here. The first thing is the water. Now look at what he does. The priest, verse 18, shall set the woman before Yahweh, there's that word lifnai Adonai again, dishevel the woman's hair, and place in her hands the grain offering of remembrance, which is the grain offering of jealousy. Now, you got to place yourself back in the ancient mindset, where I guess the best thing to do is imagine a very conservative, contemporary, very conservative Arab country, where the women have to be covered and veiled all the time. And the idea of a man, not her husband, publicly disheveling her hair was the most aggressive, demeaning, sexually charged action that could ever be imagined. She is being sexually humiliated. It would be tantamount to stripping her naked and poking her with sticks. I mean, the worst kind of sexual humiliation you could imagine. That's what's being done to her. And again, keep in mind, I assume I mentioned this when we went over Susanna in the first class, the same thing is done with her. The priest uncovers and messes up her hair. This was a symbolic form of serious sexual humiliation. It's very important we understand that. The priest shall set the woman before Yahweh, and it's done lifnai Adonai. Dishevel the woman's hair and place in her hands the grain offering. In his own hand the priest shall have the water of bitterness that brings the curse. So this is called the water of bitterness that brings the curse. The priest has it. And then he makes her say an oath. If no man has lain with you, if you have not turned aside to uncleanness while under your husband's authority, and there's the word turned aside, Sotah again, be immune to this water of bitterness that brings the curse. So this is, we're familiar with this in other contexts, in other cultures. This is an ordeal. There's no adequate way to determine whether a person is innocent or guilty, various societies have developed a kind of ordeal. And if you work it through the ordeal, well, then you're innocent. So she's declaring this. If I'm innocent, then I'll be immune from this water of bitterness that brings the curse. However, find it again. But, verse 20, if you have gone astray, there's that word again, while under your husband's authority, if you have defiled yourself and some man other than your husband has had intercourse with you, let the priest make the woman take the oath of the curse and say to the woman, Yahweh make you an execration. Now that's not a real common word in English, although it is an English word. It's a curse formula. An execration is something cursed and cast out, something regarded with disgust and uncleanness. So let Yahweh make you an execration and an oath among your people, When Yahweh, forgive the offensiveness of the language I'm about to read. When Yahweh makes your uterus drop, your womb discharge. So there's two ways we could see this. We can either see this that it's the poisons in the water that attack the woman's reproductive system. Or we could say that a woman who is guilty, who has rendered herself unclean, that it is Yahweh in this curse that attacks her reproductive system. But in any case, what we have here is the mutilation of a woman's body. And the language is even more graphic and unpleasant in the Hebrew. It talks about her stomach just dropping down to her knees, and it's the most offensive and unpleasant picture of a woman's ailment that one could ever imagine. And it goes on from there. I suppose we should read the whole thing. Now may this water that brings the curse enter your bowels and make your womb discharge, your uterus drop. And the woman shall say, Amen, Amen. The woman, after she has been placed in the center of a crowd, has been sexually attacked publicly by a priest as a cultic act, done lifnai Adonai, before Yahweh, and then she's forced to drink this poisonous solution while uttering this curse on her own reproductive system if she's guilty, and then she's forced publicly, humiliating herself further, to say, Amen, Amen. And then the ritual goes on, and I don't want to read all of it. I'll start with verse 27. When he has made her drink the water, then if she has defiled herself and has been unfaithful to her husband, the water that brings the curse shall enter into her and cause bitter pain, and her womb shall discharge, her uterus drop, and the woman shall become an execration among her people. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is clean, then she shall be immune and be able to conceive children. So not only do we have the mutilation of her body, particularly the reproductive system, but now we're told that if she's innocent, she will be able to bear children, to continue to bear children, which means that she will be, if she's guilty, sterilized. She will be, I don't like that word. She will be unable to bear children, which is a further attack on the woman's reproductive system. One more item in the Sotah that is significant, and it's at the very end of the account, verse 29. This is the law in cases of jealousy when a wife, while under her husband's authority, goes astray and defiles herself. Now notice, remember, this whole process is set in motion strictly because a husband felt jealous. That's the only reason. And all of this is set in motion. All of this suffering, all of this pain, all of this humiliation is set in motion strictly because a husband, without sufficient evidence, feels jealous. Or when a spirit of jealousy, verse 30, comes upon a man and he is jealous of his wife, then he shall set the woman before Yahweh, there's that word again, lifnai Adonai, and the priest shall apply this entire law to her. Now here it is, verse 31. The man shall be free from iniquity. In other words, this is like a whistleblower law. No matter how vicious or vengeful the man's motivation might be to subject his wife to such a humiliation, he's completely guilt-free. There's nothing legally that could ever be done to him. The man shall be free from iniquity, but the woman shall bear her iniquity. Have you ever heard anything as unequal and as unfair as that? Okay, conclusion. We've looked at two different stories in the Pentateuch, which on first glance are not very similar. We have a strong and resourceful Miriam who proves herself to be not the significant leader in Israel, but one of the significant leaders in Israel's history. And then we have this horrible account of what a husband can do to his wife if he is even remotely jealous of her. What can two stories like this have in common? One thing in particular. Both of the stories focus on and culminate in the mutilation of a woman's body. In an effort to keep women in the ancient Israelite culture disempowered, and we'll see this when we move on to Judges next class period, the men in the stories are willing to mutilate the women's bodies, expressing, among other things, a severe hatred of the women in their communities.